My husband forgot our anniversary again. But somehow, he never forgot his phone password. That small detail made me suspicious. And everything fell apart after that. The stale scent of burnt coffee grounds clung to the air in our kitchen, a familiar morning comfort that, on that particular Tuesday, felt more like a premonition. I remember looking at the date on the ceramic calendar magnet, October 17th. Our 8th wedding anniversary. And I remember the dull, aching thud in my chest as Mark walked past me, engrossed in his phone, without a word. He'd forgotten. Again. But here's the thing, the detail that lodged itself like a splinter deep under my skin. He never, ever forgot his phone password. Not when he was half asleep, not when he was stressed, not when he'd had one too many IPAs. That small, seemingly innocuous fact became the first dissonant note in the symphony of our lives, the first crack in the facade I hadn't even realized was there. And everything, absolutely everything, fell apart after that. Before all of this, before the quiet unraveling, our life was, well, it was our life. Picture it, a neat little split level in Willow Creek, Ohio, nestled between the sprawling oak trees of Blackwood Preserve and the charming, slightly overpriced boutiques of Main Street. I'm Sarah Vance, a marketing manager for a regional organic grocery chain, and my husband, Mark, was a software architect. At least, that's what I called him, because he writes really complicated code. Didn't quite capture the respect I had for his brilliant, if often abstracted, mind. We met in college, two awkward English majors who somehow found common ground over late-night coffee and terrible poetry. 8 years married, 10 years together. Our mornings were a ritual. Me, an early riser, making coffee while Mark, a reluctant participant in the dawn, would slowly materialize, bringing his own particular brand of quiet focus into the kitchen. We'd sit at the worn oak table, the one we'd painstakingly refinished together, sipping our coffee, sometimes reading, sometimes just existing in comfortable silence. Our evenings often involved me cooking, him puttering around his home office, then collapsing on the sofa to binge-watch some obscure documentary or an old sci-fi movie, the kind with questionable special effects, but undeniable heart. We had routines, you see. Sunday morning hikes through Blackwood Preserve, the earthy smell of damp leaves and pine needles filling our lungs. Friday night takeout from the Golden Walk, debating whether to get the General Tso's or the Kung Pao chicken. Small, unremarkable moments that, woven together, formed the rich tapestry of our shared existence. I thought our greatest challenge was deciding on a paint color for the guest room, or perhaps remembering to water the finicky fiddle-leaf fig in the living room. Oh, how incredibly naive I was. Looking back, I realize I was deep in what psychologists call the normalcy bias. It's this tendency we have to assume things will continue as they always have, to minimize potential threats, and to interpret unusual events as within the range of normal. My brain was actively filtering out anything that didn't fit into my pre-established, comfortable narrative of Sarah and Mark, happily ever after. I had built our life on such a solid foundation of trust and shared history that the idea of it crumbling was not just unthinkable, it was practically a violation of the laws of physics. The first anniversary Mark forgot, our 5th, I brushed it off. He'd been working on a massive project, something about migrating legacy systems. He came home, looking haggard, eyes bloodshot. I'd made his favorite lasagna, lit candles, even bought a nice bottle of Chianti. He saw the table, his face crumpled, and he looked genuinely remorseful. Oh my God, Sarah, I am so sorry. I completely lost track of time. This project is killing me. I hugged him, told him it was okay. We ate cold lasagna, and I convinced myself it truly was an oversight. Love, I thought, meant understanding. The 6th, he redeemed himself with an elaborate, if belated, weekend getaway to a B&B upstate. It felt like a course correction, a reaffirmation. But the 7th, that one stung. He remembered later that day after I'd mentioned it. Not forgotten entirely, but certainly not a priority. He blamed a heavy meeting schedule, offered to take me to the Gilded Spoon the following weekend. I agreed, a little less enthusiastically, trying to silence the small, nagging voice in the back of my mind. Now, this was the 8th. And it was clear he hadn't just forgotten the day, but the very concept of the day. The complete absence of acknowledgement felt like a void. As I watched him, head bowed, fingers dancing across his phone screen, a flicker of something new ignited in me. Not anger, not sadness, not yet. Just a cold, sharp curiosity. A feeling that something was irrevocably off. I was building a wall of excuses, brick by brick, entirely unaware that the foundation beneath me was crumbling. The red flags, when I look back now, weren't even red. They were subtle shifts in tone, faint shadows on the periphery of my vision. Like a canvas that slowly changes color, one brushstroke at a time, until you can no longer remember its original hue. There was the phone, of course. It used to be an extension of him, yes, but it was often left on the kitchen counter while he showered, or on his bedside table while we slept. Now it was glued to his hand or tucked securely in his pocket. If he set it down, it was always face down. Always. Just a habit, he'd say, if I ever jokingly commented on it. A new habit I noted mentally, but didn't press. Then there were the late nights. At first, they were plausible. Client calls with the European team, crunch time for the new server migration. But they became more frequent, and his explanations grew vaguer. Just a lot of stuff going on at work, you know. He'd come home smelling faintly of something unfamiliar, not his usual office scent, not the crisp autumn air. Sometimes it was a faint sweetness, like cheap perfume. I'd tell myself it was the scent of some coworker, innocently transferred. One evening, about 3 months before the anniversary, we were supposed to go to a new Italian place, Trattoria della Nonna, that Emily, my best friend, had raved about. I'd booked it weeks in advance. Mark came home at 8:30 p.m. "Hey, babe, what's for dinner?" he asked, throwing his keys onto the console table. My jaw tightened. "Dinner? Mark, we have reservations at Trattoria della Nonna at 8. You completely forgot, didn't you?" He looked genuinely bewildered for a second, then his face rearranged into a contrite mask. "Oh, God, Sarah, I am so sorry. I got caught up with Blake on a bug. Time just flew. Can we just order in? I'm starving." He offered a weary smile, one that used to melt me, but now felt performative. I nodded, ordering Chinese. As we ate, he meticulously scrolled through his phone, occasionally chuckling at something I couldn't see. When I asked what was so funny, he just mumbled, "Work stuff." It was a microaggression of the heart. Another time, his phone buzzed incessantly during dinner, a barrage of rapid-fire notifications. He kept checking it under the table, his thumb flying across the screen. "Who are you texting so furiously?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. He flinched almost imperceptibly. "Just Greg, about the project. He's got some new ideas." Greg. Greg was his boss, a 50-something man who communicated primarily via email and occasional stern voicemails, not rapid-fire texts after work hours. My internal alarm bells, once muffled, began to clang. It's funny how your mind tries to protect you. I was experiencing a profound case of cognitive dissonance. My belief system was Mark loves me, Mark is faithful, our marriage is solid. His actions were contradicting that. Instead of altering my belief, I started altering my perception of his actions, making excuses, rationalizing away the incongruities. It was easier to believe that I was being overly sensitive or that he was just stressed than to confront the terrifying possibility that my entire world was built on a lie. Then came October 17th, our 8th anniversary. I'd taken the day off, booked us a table at the Gilded Spoon, the kind of place where the tablecloths are crisp white and the waiters know their way around a sommelier's recommendation. I bought a new dress, did my hair. I even bought him a small, thoughtful gift, a rare, first edition copy of one of his favorite sci-fi novels. I spent the afternoon humming, bustling around the house, preparing for a quiet celebration. I imagined his face lighting up when he saw the book, the warmth of his hand in mine across the table. He was supposed to be home by 6. 6 o'clock came. Then 6:30. 7. By 7:30, the reservation was long past. My beautiful dress felt like a costume. The dinner I hadn't eaten felt like a lump in my throat. He walked in at 8:15. The key turning in the lock felt like a gunshot in the oppressive silence of the house. He looked tired, as usual. His eyes, though, they seemed distant. He carried no flowers, no card, no small, crinkling bag from his favorite bookstore. "Hey, babe," he said, just like any other Tuesday. He went straight to the fridge, grabbing a beer. Long day. And there it was, the final, undeniable proof. He had forgotten. Utterly, completely, definitively forgotten. The anniversary itself was a pinprick, but the way he forgot, the casual dismissal of a day that was supposed to represent the culmination of our shared history, was the wound. I felt my voice, usually so steady, crack as I spoke. Mark? Do you know what today is? He paused, beer halfway to his lips. He thought for a moment, genuinely, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then his eyes widened slightly. Oh God. Babe, I'm so sorry. It's our anniversary, isn't it? 8th. The apology felt hollow, practiced. And then, the catalyst. The single, visceral moment everything truly changed. Yes, Mark. It is, I said, my voice barely a whisper. And you forgot, just like you've been forgetting so many things lately. Dates, plans, me. His eyes hardened, a flash of defensiveness. That's not fair, Sarah. I'm under a lot of pressure at work. You know that. He pulled out his phone, probably to check a work text or deflect. As he did, his thumb hovered over the unlock screen. For a split second, I saw his exact pattern. My mind, sharp despite the emotional wreckage, registered it. Then, for some inexplicable reason, a flicker of panic in his eyes, he quickly typed it in, shielding the screen from my view with his hand. And in that instant, a chilling realization washed over me. He could forget our day, the day we built our life, the day that held the promise of our future. But he never, ever, forgot a string of numbers and symbols that guarded his secrets. That moment felt like slow motion. The clink of his beer bottle against the counter. The subtle hum of the refrigerator. The sudden, suffocating knowledge that the man standing before me, the man I'd loved for a decade, was a stranger. My chest tightened, as if an invisible hand was squeezing the air from my lungs. The room seemed to tilt. The world as I knew it, solid and predictable, had fractured into a million glittering pieces. That night, the quiet hum of our refrigerator sounded less like comfort and more like a ticking bomb. I didn't confront him that night. I couldn't. The weight of that realization was too immense, too crushing. Instead, I retreated into myself, a silent, seething anger simmering beneath a veneer of detached politeness. The next morning, I went through the motions of breakfast, of saying goodbye, but my mind was already a relentless investigator. The seed of suspicion had been planted, and now it was furiously sprouting. My first thought was the phone. I knew the pattern. I had seen it. But getting it when he wasn't around was the challenge. Mark never let it out of his sight. My opportunity came a few days later. He had a particularly early meeting, one he'd been grumbling about for days. He was in such a rush, he left his phone charging on his bedside table. My heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it. I crept into the bedroom, the morning light filtering weakly through the blinds. The phone lay there, a sleek, black rectangle of secrets. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. I typed the pattern. It unlocked. A rush of adrenaline, quickly followed by a wave of nausea. What was I doing? Was I really about to invade his privacy? To confirm my worst fears? Then I remembered the forgotten anniversaries, the vague excuses, the way his eyes had looked when he typed that password. Yes, I was. I went straight to his messages. There it was. A conversation with a contact simply named C. Not a coworker. The tone was intimate, playful. Can't wait to see you tonight, Mark. That little Italian place was perfect. Wish you could have stayed longer. My breath hitched. The little Italian place. The one he'd forgotten to take me to. Trattoria della Nonna. My stomach churned. I scrolled further. Photos. A woman I didn't recognize, laughing, her arm linked through his at a dimly lit restaurant table. A selfie of them, heads close together, at a park I knew, Blackwood Preserve. Our hiking spot. Each image, each text, was a shard of glass, embedding itself deeper into my heart, twisting the knife that was already there. There were dates, too, correlating precisely with his late nights at work. The evidence was damning, undeniable. I dug deeper. His email. A confirmation for a weekend trip to a cabin upstate, booked for them. A cabin in the same region as the B&B where he'd taken me after forgetting our 6th anniversary. A sick symmetry. My initial anger transformed into a cold, clinical determination. I took screenshots of everything. Sent them to myself. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. When I was done, I placed it back exactly where I found it, a ghost of a touch leaving no trace. The house, our haven, now felt like a mausoleum of broken promises. I called Emily, my best friend since 5th grade, her number a blur through the tears. I need to tell you something. I think Mark is cheating on me. Her calm voice on the other end was a lifeline. She didn't sound surprised. Sarah, honey, I was worried this might happen. Remember a few months ago, when I asked if everything was okay? He seemed different. Distant, almost. And he was always on his phone. She recounted a few instances, seeing him leave a coffee shop with a woman he introduced only as a new project manager, the vague answers when she asked about his weekend. It wasn't just me. Other people saw it too. My mind reeled. All those times he dismissed my concerns made me feel like I was imagining things, being overly sensitive. This is gaslighting, pure and simple. It's a form of psychological manipulation where a person makes you question your own memory, perception, or sanity. Mark had been doing it subtly for months, eroding my confidence in my own observations, making me doubt my gut feelings. He'd create a false narrative and then dismiss my accurate perceptions as being crazy or stressed. It was insidious, and it had worked. Until now. The investigation continued. I checked our joint bank account. There were charges from the Gilded Spoon for 2, not 1, 2 weeks before our anniversary. For him and C. He had taken her to our anniversary restaurant. The betrayal was so deep, so calculated, it felt physical. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of deceit. My car's odometer. I remembered filling up his tank a few weeks prior and noting the mileage. I checked it again. It had gone up significantly more than his usual commute would account for, confirming his excursions with C. Every new discovery was a shard of glass, embedding itself deeper into my heart, twisting the knife that was already there. I learned her name, Chloe. She wasn't a project manager. She was a graphic designer from a completely different firm, someone he'd met through a mutual industry event. A whole parallel life, meticulously constructed, kept hidden behind a phone password and a practiced smile. The hardest part wasn't just finding out about Chloe. It was grappling with the person Mark had become, or perhaps, the person he had always been, hidden beneath the veneer of our shared life. The man who could lie so effortlessly, who could compartmentalize his life into neat, separate boxes. The man who could come home to me, share a meal, a bed, while simultaneously building an entirely new future with someone else. This wasn't just a lapse in judgment, this was a deliberate, sustained deception. I realized I was caught in the grips of the sunk cost fallacy. I had invested 8 years, my youth, my dreams, my very identity into this marriage. The idea of walking away felt like throwing all of that away, admitting it was a waste. It was terrifying to consider abandoning something I had poured so much of myself into, even if it was clearly broken beyond repair. This fallacy keeps many people trapped in situations that are no longer serving them, simply because the thought of starting over feels like a greater loss than staying in pain. The confrontation. It happened the following Saturday. Mark was home, casually watching a football game. The normalcy of it was nauseating. I walked into the living room. A folder clutched in my trembling hand, the screenshots, the bank statements, the mileage notes. I placed it on the coffee table, directly in front of him. He looked at the folder, then at me, a flicker of apprehension in his eyes. "What's this, Sarah?" he asked, trying to sound nonchalant. "It's everything, Mark," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Everything you've been hiding." I opened the folder, pushing the evidence towards him. The photos, the texts, the dinner receipts from the Gilded Spoon, not just ours, but the earlier one. His face drained of color. He picked up one of the screenshots, a text from Chloe. "Sarah, I can explain." His voice was weak, pathetic. "No, you can't," I countered, the dam finally breaking. "You can't explain why you took her to our anniversary restaurant. You can't explain why you've been lying to me for months. You can't explain why you forgot our anniversary, but never your damn phone password." The words tumbled out, raw and painful. He stammered, tried to deflect, to minimize. "It was just a mistake, Sarah. A moment of weakness. It doesn't mean anything. The classic playbook. Doesn't mean anything?" I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "It means everything, Mark. It means our entire life was a lie." He tried to apologize, to beg, to plead. He even tried to turn it around, accusing me of invading his privacy. "How could you go through my phone, Sarah? That's a violation." The sheer audacity of it left me speechless for a moment. But I wasn't the old Sarah. I was an investigative architect now, and I had built my case. I saw him for what he was, a man utterly devoid of empathy, capable of calculated deception without a flicker of remorse. This, I later learned in therapy, aligned eerily with traits of the dark triad: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Not necessarily a full diagnosis, but certainly the manifestation of some of those characteristics. The inflated ego, the manipulative tendencies, the lack of genuine remorse, it all clicked into place. My Mark, the quiet, kind man I married, was a carefully constructed persona. The real Mark was a stranger. The fallout was swift and devastating. I asked him to leave that night. He packed a bag, mumbled more excuses, and walked out of the house we had built together, the one we had planned to grow old in. The silence after he left was deafening, yet somehow liberating. Then came the tears, a torrent that lasted for days. I felt a profound sense of loss, not just for Mark, but for the future I had envisioned, the family we were supposed to build. Friends were split. Some rallied around me, offering support, food, and endless cups of tea. Others, surprisingly, tried to mediate, urging me to work things out. They couldn't grasp the depth of the betrayal, the fundamental breach of trust. My family was furious, particularly my older brother, who threatened to have a chat with Mark. I had to restrain him. The divorce proceedings were messy, as they always are. He fought for the house, for assets, portraying himself as the wronged party, or at least, a victim of circumstance. My lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Brenda, calmly presented my evidence. The screenshots, the bank records, the detailed timeline I had meticulously compiled. The judge was not swayed by his pleas for a second chance. The house was mine. The settlement was fair. But money and property couldn't heal the gaping wound in my soul. I was emotionally shattered. This wasn't just a relationship ending, it was a fundamental shift in my understanding of love, trust, and even myself. I found myself isolated, distrustful, replaying every moment, searching for clues I'd missed. This is the cruel nature of traumatic bonding, where the very relationship that caused the trauma becomes the source of false comfort or hope for reconciliation. Despite all the pain, a part of me, a small, twisted part, still yearned for the Mark I thought I knew. It took months of therapy to untangle those knots of conflicting emotions, to understand that what I was yearning for was a ghost, an illusion. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to rebuild. The house, once filled with ghosts, started to feel like my own again. I redecorated, painted the living room a vibrant shade of blue that Mark would have hated. I threw out all the old coffee mugs. I started hiking Blackwood Preserve alone, finding solace in the quiet majesty of nature. I reconnected with hobbies I'd abandoned. I rediscovered myself. It was a long, arduous journey, filled with setbacks and moments of crushing despair. But with each step, I grew stronger. I learned that what I had experienced, the resilience I found, was a powerful form of post-traumatic growth. It's the positive psychological change experienced as a result of adversity and other challenges in order to rise to a higher level of functioning. I lost a husband, a home, and a future I thought was set in stone. But in the ashes of that destruction, I found something far more valuable, myself. I found a strength I never knew I possessed, a fierce independence and a renewed sense of purpose. The smell of burnt coffee no longer fills me with dread, it's just a smell. My phone is my own, filled with messages from true friends and a future I am building, brick by painful, beautiful brick, entirely on my own terms. And this time, there are no passwords hiding secrets. Just a wide-open future.